possessed by a demon? No, certainly not. The Bible has no concept of mental illness. It has no idea in that a time of multiple personality disorders, or schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, or autism, or Tourette's, or any other illness or disorder that we know today. And in the Bible, there's either normal or there's not normal behavior. If a person fell into the not normal category, oftentimes they were thought to have been possessed by a demon. Some of the stories of Jesus exorcising a demon from a person, they're actually healing stories of someone who has been healed from one of these various mental illnesses, or even somebody with epilepsy who falls on the ground and rises around. Jesus is healing them with that. However, some of the stories about Jesus exorcising demons are actually probably true stories. Even in the Episcopal Church, to this day, there are instructions on who to contact if it is felt or believed that an exorcism is needed. Now, exorcism movies make for great box office hits, but what is portrayed oftentimes in these movies is far from reality. The devil, or diabolos, is a trickster and a deceiver and a tempter. If you've never read C.S. Lewis' The Screwtape Letters, I highly recommend it. The subtitle to the book is How a Senior Demon Instructs a Junior Demon in the Art of Temptation. In Ephesians chapter 6, not one of today's readings, Paul writes to them and says, "Our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." In our reading today from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, he's having to deal with a petty dispute about eating meat sacrificed to idols. Paul is spiritually and theologically smart enough to know that gods of stone and wood are just mere idols, and he explains that to those he's writing to the church. He basically says meat is meat, unless it's lamb. That's for all you big fat Greek folks out there. But Paul says, hey, if you can go to the idol meat market and you can get ribeye steaks and lamb chops at the premium price, go for it. But just be wary of those other people who might struggle with those kinds of things. Yet some imps in Paul's church are stirring up trouble over this topic. Paul vows to never eat meat if it is going to cause angst in his churches. But the problem then becomes about, in our modern day society, about vegetarians and vegan Christians using this passage to say, look, see, even Paul says you shouldn't eat meat, and thus protesting against all aspects of the meat industry. This impish behavior when it's openly done in the churches, is not a great thing. I find it fascinating in today's gospel reading, which is one of my many favorite passages, that Jesus spends considerable time teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum before this demon, or this person possessed by a demon, exposes itself. I call it a demon, but our NRSV, New Revised Standard Version that we read from, calls it an unclean spirit. The New International Version calls it an impure spirit. And as usual, I usually go to the Message Bible, and it says Jesus was interrupted by a man who was deeply disturbed, unclean thoughts. Maybe it's a slippery slope. A person starts having unclean thoughts, and then, an imp is then saying to them, that really felt good. Let's have another. It starts out innocently enough, but then escalates. Before long, this tainted person starts verbalizing, saying out loud their unclean thoughts. Now, when I say unclean thoughts, I'm not necessarily meaning thoughts of a sexual nature. It can be as simple as insulting another person. Insulting someone, especially someone you dislike or despise, can feel pretty good. But yet, then you start to feel a little smug. And like I said, you kind of like it, so you want to do some more of it. But then before long, this unclean spirit turns that person into a bully or a tyrant. I can see in my own imagination in this gospel story, this man in the synagogue going around whispering their thoughts to others and members in the synagogue. Maybe the man whispers, I hear that Jedediah eats bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches, and he loves his pork chops rare. And you'll get that reference if you know the Jewish law. What I want to know is how long had this man been whispering troubled thoughts throughout the synagogue and being totally unaware of the demon that's possessing him? How many churches have been suddenly torn apart by the work of a person with an unclean spirit whispering in the ears of other church members? And then after the damage is done and the church is torn apart beyond all repair, the pastor is shocked to find out, and because he has no clue, he or she has no clue what's happened. Jesus bided his time until the unclean spirit could take it no more. Hearing Jesus preach and teach God's good news was like scalding hot water being poured on this spirit, and it eventually has to cry out to Jesus for relief. I can give you example after example of personal accounts of churches I've known that have been destroyed or seriously damaged and harmed by unclean spirits living within holier-than-thou Christians. I'm sure you've heard similar stories yourself. And it's my understanding that St. John's has not been too immune to such spirits. The churches that survive such an onslaught from unclean spirits do so because they refuse to play the devil's game. For the past 18 plus years that I've served here at St. John's, I've preached and taught the triangle game. And if you've never heard me preach it before, just stick around long enough and you'll hear it. The triangle game of unhealthy communication in churches and other organizations and businesses is one example of how unclean spirits spin their little web of falsehoods and distrust. I've even had members of other churches come up to me and whisper in my ear about things going on amiss in other churches, which makes me wonder how many people, maybe former members of St. John's, have gone around saying, "Have you heard about Father Allen and what's going on in St. John's?" Jesus commanding unclean spirits, be silent and come out. It would be